Welcome to one of the most unsettling cold cases to emerge from the American Midwest, a story buried for decades in the heart of Doniphan County, Kansas. The seemingly innocuous archives of the Doniphan County Historical Society held a secret so dark, so profound, that its discovery would send shivers through a small community. This chilling tale was contained not in dusty tomes or official records, but in a simple water-damaged box. Inside, a collection of letters from the years 1910 to 1915 lay unexamined, their secrets sealed away by time and neglect. It wasn't until the summer of 1963 that an archivist, while conducting a routine inventory, stumbled upon the box. The letters were a correspondence between two individuals, a man named Theodore Blackwood and a woman named Eleanor Wright. As the archivist read, a quiet horror began to unfold, revealing details of a shared philosophy so twisted, so deviant, that it defied all conventional understanding of human nature. The archivist immediately contacted local authorities, but what followed was a brief and almost impossibly quiet investigation. The letters were deemed too disturbing for public knowledge. They were officially sealed and filed away, their contents nearly forgotten. 5 years later, in 1968, the historian Margaret Wells, a woman with a keen eye for the forgotten footnotes of history, requested access to the very box that had been locked away. Wells was researching a book on early 20th century rural correspondence, and these letters, she believed, held unique sociological insights. She had no idea that they would become the singular obsession of her remaining life. Wells never completed her book. The more she delved into the words of Theodore and Eleanor, the more she was drawn into a web of mystery and horror. She began compiling private notes, a frantic, handwritten record of her findings, a testament to her descent into the case's grim and baffling details. These notes remained unpublished until her death in 1969, when her daughter found them in a locked drawer. The daughter, in a state of shock, sent the materials to the Historical Society, where they would be largely dismissed until a graduate student's research years later. What we know of this story is a mosaic pieced together from Wells's scattered notes, faded county records, and the fragmented testimonies of elderly Elwood residents who were interviewed during the brief 1963 investigation. The names of some individuals have been changed to protect their descendants, but the core events, the locations, and the timeline stand as a terrifying testament to a reality far stranger than fiction. Theodore Blackwood arrived in the quiet town of Elwood in March of 1908. He was a man of precise habits and a solitary nature, a figure who seemed to exist on the periphery of the town's social life. He purchased a modest two-story house on the outskirts, a property that had previously been home to the Miller family, who had left town after losing a child to influenza. The county records list his occupation as medical supplier, a vague and intriguing designation. As Wells's investigation later revealed, he had no formal medical training, no business license, and no apparent business connections within the town. Neighbors described him as polite but deeply reserved. He kept to himself, making his purchases at the general store with minimal conversation. He was rarely seen after dusk. The property included a small outbuilding, which Theodore quickly converted into what he called his workshop. The townspeople had no reason to question him, but local accounts suggest that deliveries to this workshop occurred monthly, always after dark, from a wagon that made the journey from St. Joseph across the river. James Henderson, a teenager at the time and Theodore's nearest neighbor, later told investigators that he once witnessed men unloading a long wooden crate from a wagon late one night. When his father confronted Theodore about it the next day, he simply explained that he had received a shipment of specialized equipment that required careful handling. The elder Henderson, ever a man to mind his own business, did not press the matter further, but he did instruct his family to avoid Theodore's property. The subtle oddities in Theodore's life in Elwood were often noted but never questioned. He attended Sunday church services but never stayed for the social gatherings. The postmaster, Harold Jenkins, recalled that the medical journals Theodore subscribed to were often accompanied by packages from universities in Chicago and St. Louis, parcels that hinted at a life and a work far beyond the comprehension of the town. The second half of this chilling equation arrived in Elwood in December of 1909. Eleanor Wright was a woman of about 30 who registered as a widow from Springfield, Illinois. Yet her past was a shifting, inconsistent narrative that no one in Elwood bothered to question. To her landlady, Mrs. Henley, she was a refined woman of means whose husband was a natural sciences professor. To Dr. Morrison, the physician who hired her as an assistant, he was a medical researcher. And to the minister's wife, he was a military surgeon who served in the Spanish-American War. Investigators later found no death certificate or burial record for an Edward Wright matching any of Eleanor's descriptions. She was described by Mrs. Henley as well-spoken and educated, with a peculiar intensity in her eyes. Eleanor's knowledge of anatomy and surgical procedures was profound, despite her lack of formal training. Dr. Morrison's records would later note her unusual fascination with terminal cases and her request to be present during final moments. Eleanor's presence in Elwood during a harsh winter was a stroke of serendipity. With travel at a standstill, she spent her days organizing the doctor's library and assisting with preparations of various compounds. Dr. Morrison's wife, Sarah, recalled that Eleanor displayed an extensive knowledge of chemical preservatives and their applications, speaking of embalming with a passion most women reserve for recipes. Eleanor's peculiar habit of sketching in the local cemetery, documenting interesting epitaphs and funerary art, was dismissed as a harmless eccentricity. The first documented meeting between Theodore and Eleanor occurred on January 12, 1910, when Theodore came to Dr. Morrison's office. Dr. Morrison's log notes a curious recognition between the two. Theodore returned 3 more times that month, always on days when Eleanor was working. By early February, they were seen walking together after church services, their conversations conducted in hushed tones, falling silent when others approached. Mrs. Henley's diary captured this perfectly. There is something in their manner that unsettles me, though I cannot name it. Their initial correspondence confirms an immediate and profound connection, a recognition of shared interests that went far beyond ordinary social compatibility. Theodore's first letter to Eleanor spoke of finding another soul who understands the beauty of stillness, the perfection of the final moment. And Eleanor's reply affirmed this kinship, writing of a recognition that passes between those who have glimpsed beyond the veil. They were not strangers who met by chance. They were two people who had found in each other a mirror of their own darkest selves. They were destined to meet and to fulfill their terrifying purpose together. The proximity of their homes did little to diminish their need for correspondence. Theodore and Eleanor began exchanging letters several times a week, a practice that seemed to deepen their bond rather than simply convey information. This ritual became a form of psychological foreplay, a means of building anticipation for their shared pursuits. It was through these meticulously crafted letters that their mutual pathology was fully revealed, offering a chilling glimpse into a relationship founded on the most deviant of shared fascinations, the beauty of death and the preservation of human remains. The language they used was a delicate poetic code. Specimens were not bodies, but works of art. Acquisitions were not robberies, but acts of spiritual grace. In a letter dated March the 28th, Theodore wrote of a most successful expedition, describing a specimen that exceeds my expectations in every regard. He spoke of the preservation process not as a task, but as artistry, a meticulous act of fine detail work that transforms mere remains into something transcendent. He was eager for Eleanor's artistic eye, acknowledging that her techniques, learned from her time with Edward, had already proven valuable. Eleanor, for her part, fully embraced this grotesque philosophy. Dr. Morrison, her employer, found her preference for assisting with terminal patients unusual, but attributed it to her supposed past experience. What he did not know was that Eleanor was methodically documenting the physical decay of the ill and the changes that accompanied their final moments. This information, detailed in her letters, was a morbid field guide for their shared craft. Their correspondence, spanning from February to November of that year, revealed a chillingly precise methodology. They believed that love's truest form must transcend the crude boundaries of life and death. In a passage from a letter dated April 17th, Eleanor wrote, "What is the body but a vessel? When the spirit departs, does not the vessel retain its form, its essence?" To her, Theodore's treasured specimens were not objects of horror, but a revelation. She felt she was truly seeing for the first time. Based on Wells's notes, the outbuilding Theodore called his workshop was in fact a macabre gallery. It housed a collection of preserved human remains, meticulously prepared with techniques Theodore had perfected. His letters hinted that he began this collection as an assistant at a funeral home in his previous life, acquiring small specimens like fingers and ears, before his activities raised suspicion and forced him to relocate. The techniques he detailed combined traditional embalming with experimental methods, using arsenic compounds, formaldehyde solutions, and alcohol-based preservatives to achieve a level of preservation he considered superior to that of the day. Eleanor's contribution, rooted in her experience with her late husband, focused on preserving soft tissues and maintaining a lifelike coloration. The narrative of her husband, Edward Wright, remained a shifting fiction, as investigators later found no record of his existence. Wells theorized that Eleanor may have been a nurse or caretaker who, after a patient's death, kept and preserved the body until discovery became inevitable. Her letters alluded to a forced, sudden departure from her previous home when authorities were summoned. As spring turned to summer, their relationship intensified. The letters described midnight excursions to the local cemetery where they would commune with the peaceful residents. More unsettling were references to new acquisitions. A letter from Theodore on June 3rd detailed their newest guest, a male from St. Joseph, approximately 40 years of age, with remarkable facial structure. Theodore was already in the midst of initial preparation and anticipated excellent results. He was particularly pleased with Eleanor's suggestions regarding the preservation of the eyes, which had proven most effective. The couple appeared to have connections in hospitals and morgues in St. Joseph in Kansas City, which alerted them to unclaimed bodies. There are also troubling references to individuals who presented themselves as ideal candidates during their travels. While the letters never explicitly confirmed they committed murder, some passages suggest they may have hastened the deaths of the terminally ill. One such chilling note from Eleanor on July 12th read, "The elderly gentleman at Dr. Morrison's practice would make an excellent addition to our gallery." She went on to describe his gaunt features as something that would preserve beautifully. She proposed a plan for Theodore to assist him home after his next appointment, noting that a secluded path near the creek offered privacy and opportunity. "This moment of discomfort," she wrote, "would lead to an eternity of dignified repose under our care." The disappearance of Edward Garvey, a 72-year-old patient of Dr. Morrison, 2 weeks after this letter was sent, aligns eerily with Eleanor's mention of a new arrival. Garvey was last seen leaving the doctor's office, and his body was never recovered. This was not an isolated incident. Throughout the summer, several other disappearances were reported in and around Elwood and neighboring towns. A traveling salesman, a young domestic servant, and an unidentified male drifter. The letters, of course, contained references to new acquisitions that roughly corresponded with these disappearances. The couple's activities transcended mere collection. They engaged in what they called artistic arrangements, positioning preserved bodies in tableau that they found aesthetically pleasing. Theodore wrote of creating a family gathering at dinner, with each member frozen in an expression of perfect contentment and of lovers embracing an eternal stillness. Eleanor's role focused on the delicate details, the placement of hands, the arrangement of facial features, and the selection of clothing to enhance the overall effect. In August, they formalized their relationship in a private ceremony they dubbed their eternal binding. Eleanor's letter from August 12th described the exchange of precious relics and vows spoken over our most perfect acquisition, a preserved young woman whose beauty would now never fade. This witness to their union was a woman from Axtell, Kansas, who had disappeared a few months earlier. Her preserved body, with its serene beauty and hands folded as if in prayer, matched the description of a woman named Catherine Miller, who had vanished while traveling to St. Joseph. Following their marriage, their letters delved into the ultimate project, their own preservation. They planned to preserve each other's bodies after death, ensuring they would remain together beyond the limitations of flesh and mortality. This pact was the ultimate expression of their shared devotion, a final, horrifying act of love that would defy both time and nature. As autumn settled over Elwood, the hushed tones and subtle shifts in their letters signaled a growing unease. Their carefully constructed routine was beginning to unravel, a consequence of their escalating activities. The once quiet speculation of their neighbors was now tinged with genuine suspicion. Dr. Morrison, in particular, was becoming a significant liability. In a letter dated October 8th, Eleanor wrote with a rare sense of urgency. Dr. M made a pointed inquiry today regarding the missing bottles of formaldehyde and carbolic acid. I deflected as best I could, suggesting they may have been used by him during my absence and subsequently forgotten. He did not appear entirely convinced. We must exercise greater caution in our acquisitions moving forward. The carefully chosen words betrayed a genuine fear that their philosophical project was on the verge of being exposed to a world that could never understand. Theodore's concerns mirrored hers. By late October, he wrote of unusual activity around his property at night. He had reason to believe that James Henderson, the teenage son of their neighboring farmer, had been observing the workshop from the adjacent field. The boy's innocent curiosity posed a dire threat to their entire operation. The boy's curiosity may prove problematic, Theodore noted in a letter. Should he glimpse our gallery even accidentally, the consequences would be dire. The simple solution he devised, locking all entrances and drawing blackout curtains even during daylight hours, was a temporary measure, a frantic attempt to hold the fragile walls of their secret world in place as they began to crumble. The final letters in the collection, written in early November, were frantic and urgent. The coded language was all but abandoned, replaced by direct, almost desperate communication. The whispers of the community were no longer a distant hum, but a clear and present danger. In what would be the last letter found, dated November 15th, Theodore's tone was one of finality. My dearest, we must accelerate our plans. Dr. Morrison's questions about the missing medical supplies have become too specific to deflect. Additionally, the inquiry from St. Joseph regarding the Potter boy cannot be ignored. The Potter boy was likely Samuel Potter, a 17-year-old who had disappeared from St. Joseph just a week earlier. According to newspaper reports, Samuel was last seen crossing the bridge to Elwood on an errand. His failure to return had triggered a search that now extended across the river, bringing St. Joseph police officers and their pointed questions to the quiet streets of Elwood and right to Theodore's doorstep. The time for caution was over. A complete and total retreat was their only option. I have made arrangements for our relocation, Theodore wrote, his words a desperate manifesto for survival. Pack only essentials and your most precious specimens. The rest must be hidden or destroyed. Meet me at midnight on Thursday at the appointed place. We shall cross into Nebraska and make our way west, where we can continue our work without interference. This final instruction, a plan for a new life built on the same macabre foundation, was a testament to their unwavering devotion to their shared passion, regardless of the cost. What transpired next is documented in fragmented police reports and newspaper articles. Just 3 days after Theodore's final letter, on the evening of November 18, 1910, a ferocious fire engulfed Theodore's property. The blaze, as reported by the Troy, Kansas Chief newspaper, was visible for miles. Neighbors, including the Henderson family, rushed to help, but were driven back by a series of explosions, likely caused by the volatile chemicals stored within the house and workshop. The intense heat reduced the structures to ash, leaving only the stone foundation and the chimney standing as silent witnesses. The fire's intensity was unnatural. James Henderson, who was among the first to witness the conflagration, later recounted the horrifying spectacle to investigators. It wasn't like any house fire I'd ever seen, he described. The flames were blue in places, and the heat was so intense we couldn't get within 50 yards. There were explosions that sent debris flying in all directions. The smell was terrible, not just burning wood, but something else, something chemical, and worse, something I can't describe but will never forget. Despite the destructive inferno, no bodies were ever recovered. Sheriff William Donovan's official report, filed on November 20th, noted that no human remains have been identified among the ashes, leaving a critical question unanswered. Had the couple perished in the blaze, their bodies incinerated beyond recognition, or had they succeeded in their escape, orchestrating the fire to erase all evidence of their crimes? The report also made a passing mention of unusual specimens of an unidentified nature found in the ruins, which were promptly sent to medical examiners in Kansas City, but were never officially documented. Local rumors, whispered in personal diaries and letters from the time, suggested the authorities had discovered more than they were willing to publicly acknowledge. Martha Wilson, the wife of one of the men who helped search the debris, wrote to her sister in a state of shock, "Henry came home in a state I've never seen before, white as a sheet and unable to speak of what they found in that man's cellar. He would say only that it was unnatural and that the sheriff had ordered everyone to keep silent about the matter. He has had nightmares since, calling out about the faces and the glass eyes." This chilling account, a testament to the horror that lay buried beneath the foundation, confirms that the fire was not merely a tragic accident, but a desperate and calculated act of a pair of fugitives. The official record ends here. No death certificates were ever issued for Theodore and Eleanor Blackwood, and no further documentation of them ever surfaced in Kansas or neighboring states under those names. The letters, miraculously preserved in a metal box that survived the fire, were discovered during the cleanup of the property and found their way to the county records office, where they remained, a terrifying testament to a love story gone horribly wrong, forgotten by all but a handful of people. The disappearance of the couple, the strange blue flames, the terrifying scent of chemicals in the air, and the whispered rumors of what was found in the cellar all contributed to the legend of the Blackwoods. A legend that would not be challenged or re-examined for nearly half a century. Their final act in Elwood was not one of defeat, but of escape, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a legacy of terror that would only grow with time. The trail of Theodore and Eleanor went cold after the fire of 1910. For decades, they were presumed dead, victims of their own dangerous experiments. The letters, a mere historical curiosity, were filed away and forgotten until historian Margaret Wells unearthed them in 1963. Unlike the local authorities, Wells saw not a closed case, but a chilling puzzle waiting to be solved. She couldn't shake the nagging question, if their bodies were never found, did they truly die in the blaze? Wells' investigation was a painstaking, methodical pursuit across the country. Her notes, a private and increasingly obsessive record, reveal her journey from the dusty archives of Kansas to the coastal towns of California. She began by cross-referencing records of similar, suspicious incidents from that period. Missing persons, individuals with medical backgrounds living in isolation, and unexplained fires that seemed to erase all evidence. She hypothesized that the Blackwoods were not isolated practitioners of their craft, but part of a loose, informal network of like-minded individuals who shared techniques and perhaps even specimens through coded correspondence. Her research led her to a small, remote coastal town in Northern California. She was tracking reports of a reclusive couple who had lived there from approximately 1911 to 1935 under the names Thomas and Elizabeth Bradford. The description of the couple was a near-perfect match for Theodore and Eleanor. Local records indicated that the Bradfords had operated a private museum of medical oddities that was only open to a select few. The most shocking detail came from a 1935 newspaper article from the Humboldt County Gazette, which Wells had located. It reported that Thomas Bradford had disappeared following the death of his wife and that her body was missing from the premises when authorities arrived. Investigators had also discovered a private collection of preserved human specimens in their home, which they had removed for proper examination and burial. The article described the Bradford residence as a modest house with extensive and unusual modifications to the cellar, including specialized ventilation and chemical apparatus, a chilling parallel to Theodore's workshop in Elwood. The Bradfords were seen as educated and refined by the few who interacted with them. Thomas claimed to be a retired medical researcher, while Elizabeth was known for her considerable knowledge of anatomy. Wells was convinced she had found them. She had also uncovered photographs from a 1925 community event showing the couple. Though the images were of poor quality, Wells's annotations pointed out strong similarities to the descriptions of the Blackwoods. There was one particularly unsettling observation. Wells noted that Elizabeth Bradford appeared significantly younger than her supposed age would suggest, raising a horrifying possibility. Was the woman in the photograph truly Eleanor? Or was she a later acquisition, a new companion for Thomas, posed as his wife to maintain the facade? Wells traveled to California in early 1969, intent on uncovering the full truth. Her journey, however, was cut short. She suffered a fatal stroke just weeks after arriving. Among her effects was a sealed envelope addressed to the Donovan County Historical Society. Her final handwritten note was brief and terrifying. What I have found confirms my worst suspicions. The Blackwoods did not perish in 1910, but continued their activities for decades. More disturbing still, I believe they may have had disciples who carry on their work to this day. I have arranged to view the Bradford collection tomorrow. Should anything happen to me, please forward these materials to the proper authorities. What Margaret Wells had found, or what she believed she was about to find, died with her. The Bradford collection she referred to was never officially located. Her notes, upon being delivered to the Historical Society as requested, were dismissed by the director as a historical curiosity of no contemporary relevance and filed away. The case remained closed, and Wells's findings were largely forgotten, a footnote in the Blackwoods' twisted legacy. Her research, however, did not stand alone. A separate, chilling discovery in St. Joseph, Missouri in 1965 seemed to corroborate her theories. During the renovation of an old building, workers found a hidden, sealed room in the basement. Inside were preserved human remains, posed in lifelike positions around a small table, as if engaged in conversation. The building had previously housed the medical supply company that Theodore had frequented, and the techniques used on the bodies were far more advanced than standard mortuary practices of the era. According to Wells's notes, a police officer who was present at the scene described finding a map in the room with markings in several states, including Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, and California, with dates next to each. The latest date on the map was 1935, corresponding with the disappearance of Thomas Bradford. The officer said he believed they had stumbled upon something much bigger than a single individual's hobby. Then in 1967, a retired physician from Axtell, Kansas, wrote a letter to a newspaper recalling a strange couple he had seen at a funeral in 1910. He described them with an intensity that he found disturbing, noting that the woman had made sketches in a notebook. 3 days later, the grave was found disturbed and the body was missing. The physician's detailed description of the couple matched that of the Blackwoods, and the timing aligned with the acquisition of the Axtell beauty mentioned in their letters. This chilling account provided one of the few concrete links between the letters and a verified historical event. The letters between Theodore and Eleanor, Margaret Well's notes, and the scattered reports across the country form a fragmented, incomplete picture of a couple bound by a shared, horrifying obsession. Their story is a reminder that some of history's darkest corners remain unexplored, not because they cannot be illuminated, but because what might be revealed challenges our very understanding of human nature. Wells wrote in her final note, "Some truths once glimpsed cannot be unseen." The Blackwoods found in each other the perfect companion for their darkness, proving that no matter how deviant a desire, there exists the possibility of finding someone who shares it. In that sense, theirs is a love story, perhaps the most terrifying kind of all. The curtain fell on the official Blackwood case in 1969, with the authorities' weary conclusion that any further investigation was a fruitless endeavor. The passage of time and the presumed death of all involved parties, particularly the couple in the fiery conflagration of 1910, were considered sufficient grounds to seal the file. Yet the letters remained, a grim testament to a shared obsession, filed away in the Donovan County Historical Society archives. They were a forgotten relic, a forbidden glimpse into a twisted psyche, accessible only to the most determined researchers. Theodore and Eleanor Blackwood, if they did indeed escape their fiery fate, took the full, horrifying truth of their activities with them. Their final resting place, be it a forgotten grave, a remote hidden sanctum, or a grotesque, self-made tableau, will likely remain an eternal secret. The final notes of Margaret Wells, written on the very brink of her own mortality, are perhaps the most chilling and tantalizing piece of this entire puzzle. Scribbled just hours before her fatal stroke, her last entry reads with a haunting simplicity, "I believe I have found them at last, or what remains of them. God help me, I think they achieved their final wish." The specific details of what she found in that small coastal California town, the Bradford collection she was so close to viewing, died with her. The so-called Museum of Medical Oddities she referenced has never been officially located, and the few locals who recall the reclusive couple offer only fragmented rumors, whispers of a strange pair who kept to themselves. Yet these whispers persist, a faint echo of the same unsettling story that began in Kansas half a century prior. In a strange and terrifying twist of fate, the Blackwoods' escape was sealed by fire once again. In 1969, shortly after Wells's death, a fire consumed several buildings in the very California town she had been investigating. Among them was an abandoned house on the outskirts, which had been vacant since 1935, the exact year the Bradfords had vanished. The cause of the fire was officially listed as unknown, but local rumors whispered of a deliberate act by someone familiar with the horrors the house contained. Perhaps it's for the best that some mysteries remain unsolved, some doors unopened. their dark contents forever sealed from the light. The case of Theodore and Eleanor Blackwood stands as a disturbing and deeply profound reminder that the most terrifying monsters are not supernatural beings, but ordinary people with extraordinary obsessions. They walked among the citizens of Elwood, attended church and conducted business, all while harboring thoughts and engaging in activities that would horrify their neighbors. It raises an unsettling question that has no easy answer. How many others walk among us, wearing masks of normalcy that conceal unfathomable depths? The faint echoes of this story, the sound of Theodore's workshop door closing against the Kansas wind, the scratch of Eleanor's pen documenting their specimens, the quiet conversations between two people who had found a home in their shared darkness, still resonate across the decades, a grim reminder that some human mysteries remain impenetrable. This case is a rare documented instance of shared psychopathology, where two individuals' aberrant desires found a perfect and terrifying resonance in each other. Their letters reveal not just the details of their activities, but the twisted psychological framework they constructed to justify their actions. It was a philosophy that viewed death not as an ending, but as a glorious transformation, a preservation of beauty and form beyond the corruption of life and vitality. In their distorted worldview, they were not desecrating the dead, but elevating them to a state of permanent perfection, creating a legacy that defied both time and nature. Theirs was a love story, yes, but perhaps the most terrifying kind of all, built not on emotional connection, but on a shared perversion that bound them together eternally. This unsettling narrative is a powerful reminder that truth is often stranger and far more frightening than fiction. And as we close the book on this particular account, we are left with a myriad of questions that will likely never be answered. Did Theodore and Eleanor truly escape? Did they succeed in creating their ultimate tableau, a final embrace preserved forever in a hidden crypt? What became of Jay, their silent accomplice? And what about the so-called network of like-minded individuals that Margaret Wells theorized about? Were there others who received coded instructions, maps to hidden collections, and a philosophy that turned death into art? The discovery of the hidden room in St. Joseph and the fire in California suggests that their legacy may have extended far beyond their final known location. The artifacts and rumors are all that remain. The letters, the notes, the faint whispers of a reclusive couple. The case's closure offers no real peace, only the chilling thought that their work may still be carried on by others, or that their final wish, their terrifying pact, may have been fulfilled somewhere, waiting to be found. The world is a vast place, and in its hidden corners, what other secrets lie buried, preserved against the ravages of time? We have now reached the end of this dark and twisted journey into one of history's most baffling and disturbing cases. We have explored the chilling correspondence, the gruesome activities, and the mysterious disappearance of a couple who found in each other the perfect partner for their shared darkness. The story of Theodore and Eleanor Blackwood serves as a stark warning, a cautionary tale about the human capacity for deviance and the horrifying comfort that can be found in a mutual obsession. It leaves us with a lingering sense of unease, a feeling that some doors should remain unopened and some mysteries should never be solved. We sincerely hope that this deep dive into the macabre has both captivated and educated you. What are your thoughts on this disturbing case? Do you believe the Blackwoods escaped the fire and continued their grim work? Or did their pact finally bring their story to a fiery end? We encourage you to share your theories and insights in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story and want to hear more tales from the darkest corners of history, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing these unsettling stories to light. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next chilling account. We have so many more unsettling stories to share with you, waiting to be uncovered from the shadows of the past. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay vigilant and curious.